Welcome to the NIAA Animal Identification and Information System Council meeting. As you know, we've tried to continue our dialogue and have this on a fairly regular basis to make sure that we're all staying abreast of industry opportunities, industry evolution and changes. And today is no different. Our last meeting, we focused quite a bit on databases and the data side, the information system side of our council work, and we'll start today doing very much the same thing. We'll continue that focus with data management with Dr. Paul Chard of Cattleman's Resource joining us, talking about what he does up in Northeast Colorado with cattle producers. And then we're going to pivot a little bit in that so much of our focus is on the cattle business. Today, we're going to spend a good portion of our time talking about a project that's going on in the American sheep industry. And we'll have Drs. Amy Hendrickson and Cindy Wolf joining us for that segment of our program. So it'd be good to give us the people that are very cattle centric a chance to step out of that and see how another part of our industry is handling animal identification and information systems to address the specific needs that they have within their species group. With that, Neville, I'll kind of flip it over to you and let you kind of have your opening comments as well.
Yeah, just first of all, I just want to say thank you to our participants today, and then also our panelists, Paul, Ed, Amy, and Cindy. You know, we were just talking that we continue to get 55 to 60 people registered for these, so obviously we're meeting a need, and I know people that maybe can't join us right now are going back and watching the recordings, and so just really excited about that, and that we continue to maintain some interest in this. And so it is hard to believe, as we were just talking about, that it was 2 years ago, right? That we're just about at that mark where none of us even knew what a Zoom meeting was probably. So it's real good. I'm especially excited about today because it's just super applied and you know, where we need to be. And I think we all can kind of get some tangibility into this as we go forward and where we need to go. So just, and I will mention at the end, but while it's on my mind, for this council, we have tentatively planned a meeting for March 1st. That is not going to occur. We're going to move that really to incorporate that into the annual meeting in April. So you just want to mark your calendar, and those of you that have registered, just recognize that we will not be having that meeting. So with that, Glenn, I think we're good to go.
All right, well, we will, as we said, we'll start and again, extend our information system and the application of information system segment from last time into our opening segment today. We're really pleased to have Dr. Paul Chard join us from Cattleman's Resource. Paul was raised on his family farm and dairy south of Rush, Colorado. He did his undergrad and grad work at Colorado State University in the early 2000s. Started a veterinary practice in Rush, focusing on livestock and food animal medicine in 2003 with his wife, Megan. In 2004, they started Cattleman's Resource, and they basically serve a group up in Northeast Colorado in mixed animal veterinary medicine, but they integrate livestock equipment, animal health, and nutrition products into a holistic approach, utilizing all the information and data to help their producers make their best decisions possible. With that, Paul, thank you for joining us, and we'll turn the mouse over to you and let you charge on.
Very good. Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
So as you can see from my bio, I'm a farm kid from Eastern Colorado, and really the passion that I have that has driven us to the point where we're at now is just that agriculture background and just the hunger to help these family farm and ranches be successful. And so, can you advance that slide? So we formed Cattleman's Resource because we didn't feel like we had enough availability of a lot of products and some of the services in our area to be able to fully serve the people. We were making recommendations with nutrition products and vaccines and whatnot, and the products just weren't available here. There was no good supplier that consistently could provide those to us. And so we started out of our kitchen selling vaccine, and it quickly became too much of a monster for that. So we formed Cattleman's Resource, and it's evolved into much more than it was in the beginning. We have a dozen employees now, and our mission statement is there on your screen. That's really what drives us, and that's what makes us want to do a better job for our producers. You can advance the slide. So we really wanted to help with the efficiency, and growing up on the dairy, it was very apparent to me that there was a lot of inefficiencies, because back then there wasn't very much data driven efforts in any of the industries, and dairy kind of leads the way with that, because their data is immediate, and you can take action and see it the next day really on the bulk tank. But the beef guys, we're still struggling to pull them into the data revolution. And so we recognized that pretty early, and realized that there was a lot of efficiencies that pull up with that. And the ultimate outcome with any effective consultation or advice is to make better business decisions. And so, you really can't make a good business decision without some sort of guidance from data or information, and it needs to be accurate. The question we initially got when we started talking about these things with producers is why do we need that? You can advance that. We were early in the 2000s. We had a pretty severe drought in 2002. There was a lot of cow herd downsize at the time, and margins were pretty slim, and it was just apparent that we were running into times of higher risk and less room for error for many of our producers. And in those times, and I mean, it's exaggerated and continued and maybe worsened now, we have to be making good business decisions to survive. So with our unique working relationship built on the honesty and trust that we have with these clients, we felt like we were pretty well positioned to help them with some of this information system stuff. And so the other aspect we have, so many of these decisions that you make with cattle operations have a big biological aspect. And so we had a unique window into that as well that we could help them with. You can advance. So the main things we started focusing on, with what we could help with, is optimizing production. And optimizing production to me is different than maximizing production. Those are two different things. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But the bottom line is, shown in that picture there, my kids on shipping day, we need to be able to make sure that we're still here, a viable industry, when those guys are old enough to be the ones on the other side of the camera. And so we need to be able to optimize production, increase efficiencies. We also have a big influence on feed and nutrition with our herds. Obviously, disease mitigation is a key component with a veterinary practice. And then, believe it or not, we do have some influence on marketing, because some of the vaccine protocols and whether or not we use growth implants, all those things impact how we market cattle. You can advance. So for me, optimizing production is, I've always believed that for any given operation and their resources and their business goals, that should determine what the optimal production of their animals are. And it's not always the same as maximizing production. Sometimes it is. I've got a good friend that's an elderly rancher, and his dad always, his saying was, you can feed yourself broke. And that went back to 2002, when their neighbors were driving by and with hay trucks every day feeding cows. And his dad told him that those people will feed themselves broke. And sure enough, the next year there was a consignment auction and land auction on that place. So that really hit home for me. Was a good lesson for me to learn that we really need to be optimizing production and not maximizing, especially in our drought conditions. You can advance. So with the resources that you have on a ranch, or you have natural or fixed resources, which would be land, water, the weather or climate that you're dealing with, and then native forage. And then outside of those, uncontrollable factors, then we can look at farmed and leased resources, which can be crops or crop residues, or we can go tap into some byproducts if you've got a local source for some of those feed byproducts to help with the nutrition stuff. Genetics is a huge one, and a lot of times that is determined by business goals, or as I put on the slide, limited by business goals, depending on how you want to look at it. But also genetics may be very flexible, but it definitely has an influence on what optimal production is on your place. Humans, human resource is huge. Labor availability is horrible and getting worse. So that's definitely a big component. You can advance. So we realized that we needed to be able to identify individual animals that were optimal for your operation, and then determine progress of the herd or a lack of progress. And we really needed to be able to measure production data in a beef herd to be able to do that. Go ahead. Feed and nutrition, we need accurate animal weights and desired production levels so we can formulate more efficient diets. So we don't want to be overfeeding those cows. We don't want to be underfeeding them. And then depending on what our goal is with a set of growing animals, the diets really should be determined by what your desired gain is on those. So we can pick up a lot of efficiencies there. With disease mitigation, a really easy example to talk about there is through these critical times of disease risk could be where we're able to accurately stage pregnancies with ultrasound and good records. We can sort those cows into calving groups that helps with scours prevention. So that's one we really have a big impact on with disease. And then marketing, it's always more effective marketing if you know your accurate weights and where your production is and some of that genetic data. You can advance. So we don't want to be like this calf in the picture with our head in a bucket. And the dairy experience in college made me realize that we really needed that accurate data. And we need it on an individual cow basis. And we also need to look at it on a herd basis, because sometimes we get stuck looking at one cow at a time, and it doesn't help guide us in general management decisions. So we need both of those. We need to be able to generate meaningful analysis and reports so that we can actually impact better business decisions. Okay. So the dairy, you can measure production data multiple times a day, and it's a continuous flow of data daily. So that's very different from beef, cow, calf, which is usually only time we get to capture data is if we have them caught for something else. So we have them caught for preg check, or we have them caught for scour shots or branding. So those are the few times when we can actually capture data points, which usually is weights. Accurate weights are good. We can capture reproductive performance. So with the ultrasound, we've really honed in on that. Phenotypic observations or pathologies. So things like poor conformation or poor feet structure, things like that, poor udders. We can make those observations, but until we turn it into a data point, it doesn't help with management decisions. So we need to be able to record those. And then also there's data that you have available at sale or at harvest, depending on how much you want to chase that data. Okay. So with beef, we have fewer measurement opportunities, which makes accuracy in identification and relevant metrics more critical, because each data point that's wrong really magnifies the error. In the dairy, if we have one day out of 100 that we mismeasure the amount of milk a cow gave, it's, it kind of gets lost it gets drowned out in the data. But with a beef calf, if we're wrong on the one weight at weaning time, it impacts what his mom looks like for performance for that entire year. So error is really magnified there. So we need that clean, meaningful data. We really felt like we needed to set some guidelines for ourselves. And first of all, speed of commerce. We really didn't want to slow down anybody's operation while we're capturing data. We recognize that time is trauma, causes stress on the people and the animals. And so we needed to not have to negatively impact the speed that we can work cattle. And then we also recognize the typical rate of human error is really unacceptable to us. So every chance we can get that we don't have to actually manually type data is better for us. So if we can capture IDs electronically and as well as weights electronically, and never have to touch that data stream with a human finger. We're better off. We need rugged, reliable tools because we're out in all weather conditions, whether it's wet or dry, hot or cold. So we needed to have those tools, and we needed long-lasting individual animal ID that's easy to read. And I want to stress individual because there's so many. Most of our cow-calf herds have multiple duplicate visual IDs, and when you turn that into a spreadsheet or a data set, it's terrible to try to figure out which one's which. So if we're trying to manage on an individual cow basis, the duplicates are really a killer to us. And then we wanted this stuff to make us more efficient. So we started in 2003 with a portable ultrasound and a laptop. And at that time, when we came out in the country, people really raised their eyebrows at us. The portable ultrasound that I have always used was a goggle-based system. And so we get all gowned up and look like we stepped out of a spaceship. And guys really raised their eyebrows at us until they started seeing how accurate we were staging pregnancies that next calving season. Those guys were used to bred open as an answer at the preg check shoot. And so really the data that they got back out of that day traditionally was how many opens do I have? And that was the extent of it. And so we took that to the next step and started breaking it down by calving distribution and really looking at that data from the reproductive performance to really tune on where we need to be with things. Later on, we bought portable hydraulic chutes and added the scales to them. And we started using scale indicators to type in the data instead of the laptop. The scale indicators were more rugged, and it made it so we didn't have to retype the weight into something else. But the indicators are pretty cumbersome to enter data on, and it kind of slowed us down, and we weren't happy with that either. So we were constantly looking for a new solution, and we were invited to take the job at Livestock Exchange here in Brush as the livestock market veterinarian. And about that same year, the USDA started a pilot study for UHF tag technology. And we were quickly introduced to Fort Supply Technologies, who was and is still supplying the UHF tags and the devices and the software that was really, truly a game changer for us. In all those parameters we needed, they were really meeting all of those with their devices and software. So we were really excited to start working with them. And quickly, the USDA and Colorado State Vet approved us to use UHF tags in our bred cows that we're selling through the auction. And that was really a game changer at the auction yard, because it allowed us to start scanning those cows post-sale in the buyer pen, which I don't know how many people are familiar with how a livestock market works, but pre-sale, we preg check the cows, put an ID in them, indicate their stage of pregnancy, and then post-sale, they might be mixed up. One buyer might buy cows from 16 guys. And when we need to do a health paper to leave the yard, we have to know which cows are in that pen. Our sale barn doesn't have the ability to track that. And so it was tasked to us to be able to get those IDs captured before they needed to go on a truck in just a few minutes. And so to be able to go down to the pen and scan those UHF tags and have a digital list of 840 tags right there immediately usable was huge for us. So we started to outgrow that available tech, because we started thinking about really where do we want to go with this, and we were dealing with mixed tag technologies now, because we had UHF tags coming through, we had LF tags, and we had metal tags, and we needed a way to be able to combine those different readers and those different tag technologies and enter them into one device seamlessly. And we also wanted to start helping our clients manage data in a cloud-based database that we can have access to. They can allow us to have as much access to the data as they want, so that we can start monitoring trends and events. So we can start looking at disease rates, we can start looking at dystocia rates, we can look at pasture stocking rates with them, and then we can provide current analysis and reports that'll help them make better decisions, like was our goal years ago. And the other thing is, a lot of guys still are using the red calving books at calving time, even though they want an electronic or a spreadsheet printed out report of that at the end of the year. We were able to take those red calving books from them and translate that into a digital form So we've been doing that too some. And then also, we really wanted to be able to have a client identify a list of cows that needed to go on a truck to an out-of-state premises, and so that they could send us an ID list for a eCVI generation. We wanted to be able to do all those things. So again, Fort Supply stepped up. They just really saw the same vision that we did with a lot of these things. And they've developed a cow-calf data management solution called Fast Herd, and it's been in development for several years. They just made some great advancements in business partnerships, so it's allowed them to create some funding that allowed them to hire some more programmers and step up the advancement of the system. But it's a cloud-based system, which we wanted to be able to do. It allows for multiple users with permission controls. We can actually connect both LF and UHF readers to the same device at the same time. And so we don't have to be disconnecting and reconnecting or using multiple different devices when we get those different cows in. And they're very active developing this software and with new features. And when we ask them to change something for us, it's pretty quickly changed. So we're pretty happy with that. And now we're in the early stages of bringing clients online with that system. So I just want to go through some of the current tools we use. This is a rugged PDA device called an Archer that is really, we get these from Fort Supply. It's Windows, it's an old Windows-based system that really the user interface is pretty cumbersome, and there's a pretty steep learning curve. And the devices we sent out to the country with our clients, I think they're all sitting in a drawer somewhere, most of them now, because they're tough to use. It's tough to get data off of them. But for us, when we had a technician that was trained to use it and used it every day and still use them every day, it works very well. We can capture any parameters we want. It'll talk directly to our scale heads for a data stream from the weights, and it'll talk to either LF or UHF, just not at the same time. So that's one tool we're using. Now we're starting to use a Windows tablet. This is not a ruggedized device. You can see it's got a third-party case on it, and we're waiting until software gets developed for some of these other operating systems to be able to tap into some more rugged computers. But this is a picture of what we're using Fast Herd on now. It's a touch screen device that will connect Bluetooth to multiple tag technologies at the same time and seamlessly bring that data in. It will also bring in weight data. So that machine is doing everything that we wanted to do right into a cloud-based system. It's just not rugged yet. And there are some things available out there, but they're very expensive. So we're hoping that we can get some cheaper hardware out there to be able to get in the country with clients and our team. So this is a picture of a UHF scanner that we use at the livestock market. You can see that there's a cell phone in the clamps at the top of that reader. And when we go to the pen to scan cows, this is what we use to generate a list that goes directly into our eCVI software. It's a ruggedized reader. You can see as this cow scan right on the screen, and within, we get an order for a CVI from the office, and truly we can have a finished electronic CVI within 10 minutes of, and that's including going down and scanning the cows in the pen. So speed of commerce is huge, and it's way lower stress on the cows that we don't have to put them back through the chute. This is a picture of Megan and I. We're working on some BBD herd screening in this picture. And you notice the horses in the background, and I should have got a zoomed out picture that had pictures of the calves on the ground, but this is a busy Nebraska Sandhills rope and drag branding, and we roped between 400 and 500 calves in a morning to get them branded. And Megan and I were collecting ear notches and labeling and putting those in tubes, and we did not slow that crew down one bit with using an Archer UHF scanner and the label printer you see there in the picture. So that was a win for us. Speed of commerce is huge in a busy branding like that. One thing that's been big for us, we've got a lot of products now that we use that are both injectable and pour-on products that are several dollars per animal. And there's a dewormer that has been out for several years. It can be $20 to $25 per adult animal for a dose. And so we felt like it was really important to, look to technology to help us get accurate dosing. And so these Tapari guns is what we've been using. They give us a really accurate dose on pour or injection, and they have the ability to capture total doses and total product given during that session. And so it's pretty big for us on a billing perspective too. It's helping us out with knowing how much product we're using on each group of animals. So the equipment is expensive on the front end. Some of the things are getting less expensive, but it's an investment that I don't think every rancher is going to be willing to make. And so we've just decided that we need to make that investment for them and consolidate that cost at our clinic and provide those services ourselves. There are some bigger ranches that see the value in it, that will buy the equipment. As we advance through technology and keep adding new things, it requires continuous training, and it requires a team that has intention to do a good job with this stuff. It rewards us with increased accuracy, and the time efficiency that saves us is well worth it. I should mention too that we're doing all of our lab submissions, so brucellosis, Coggins, all those submissions we're doing now electronically, and using the Archer and the label printer to create labels on all of our submission samples. So when they get to the lab, our lab has also purchased a barcode scanner, and they're not having to transpose numbers either. So we're staying completely digital, submitting our samples. And that's helped us because most samples we can get a return from the lab in 2 days, where before, when we were doing everything manually and through the mail, it was taken up to a week. So lab results coming back way quicker to us, and it's allowed us to stay relevant and helping our clients thrive in this current business environment.
Okay, Paul, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Paul, you can stay with us for some questions after the sheep industry presentation.
Yeah, I'm actually intrigued about the sheep presentation too, because we have a big client that's a big sheep operator out here that is using LF sheep tags and UHF tags in their cows. And this outfit also just built a brand new sheep slaughter facility in Brush. And so we're looking to see, I'm interested to see the relevance for the sheep industry here, so we can help them integrate the identification and information systems better for them too.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Good. Glenn, I'll take it from
the
here.
honors.
Okay. Yeah, you bet. So it's exciting that we have the opportunity to learn more about the sheep industry and the application here. And so with us, we have Amy Hendrickson. She's executive director of the Wyoming Wool Growers Association, and you can read through her bio, but has an extensive background in food and agriculture and animal health, and also intriguing, she has a bachelor's in English. I love that. So, and I believe, Amy, you are based in Casper, Wyoming. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm in my car in Cheyenne, but
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Very good.
And I appreciate the credentials of DVM, but I am not a veterinarian.
Okay.
And so just on this slide, it's correct, but on the other one, it's not. But I really appreciate everything, everyone, being included in this and having this opportunity to kind of talk about where the sheep industry is and transitioning to electronic ID and some of the pathways and obstacles that we have currently. And well, it's not letting me go forward here. Oh, there we go.
Let me also just quickly recognize also and introduce Dr. Cindy Wolf. So for some of you old timers that are involved in NIA, Cindy is no stranger to NIAA, and very well recognized in the sheep industry, and her expertise is sought after, and back in probably the mid 2000s, Cindy, you were very involved with NIAA and through a variety of means. And I know I had the pleasure and the opportunity to work with Cindy, and it's good to see you, Cindy, by the way. So anyway, we are excited to have both of you, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. So I also had a lot of experience with NIAA back in the 2000s when I worked for the horse industry, and worked on horse ID in those days. So Nai's been a good friend to all of us here. Anyway, so you know, the big question that we often get is, why do we need to go this way? And you know, why do we need a path forward? And you know, we do expect to see a foreign animal disease in the U.S. in more likely in our lifetime than not. That's always a concern for us. But there's also, as Paul was talking, opportunity for improved competitiveness and efficiency for the industry. Cindy found this and shared it with us, and back from January 13th of this year, where APHIS seized nearly a ton of illegal animal products from China, and they found this in New York City. And one of the things that for us, you know, that's always a concern for anybody in the livestock industry, you know, for introduction of foot and mouth disease, or in the case of, you know, now with the concerns about African swine fever and all. And for us, you know, we do have those concerns, but COVID, which is not a sheep disease, had a significant impact on the sheep industry. We lost our second largest lamb processing plant, and we had our wool market, both our lamb market crashed and our wool market came to a standstill for a couple of weeks at least, and we still suffer from issues with supply chain disruptions and all. And that's a disease that doesn't even affect sheep. So the idea of something coming into the United States that could impact the ability for the sheep industry to, in the continuity of business for the sheep industry, is a real concern to us. So in the event of a FMD, the ability for a rapid EID with a wand or panel when sheep leave or come to the farm and ranch, or eventually, and hopefully sooner than later, at markets, it could be our industry's guardian in the face of numerous threats. But lest you think that the only reason that we're doing this because of our concern over foreign animal disease, is not really the case. Back in 2019, and really a little bit before then, discussions began with USDA in which they asked us to look at transitioning to EID for animal disease traceability purposes. And so our efforts in the last 2 years has been primarily based on responding to that. To us, well, we assembled a team of, I say ASI, assembled a team of knowledgeable subject matter experts from both the sheep and the goat industries, and we met via Zoom over the last 2 years. Their purpose was to evaluate the indications from USDA in their plans to adopt a real-time animal traceability system for use in economically significant animal disease outbreaks. If you go to their website, their USDA sheep and goat identification page, you'll find this paragraph or this sentence, that they're working with sheep and goat organizations to develop a plan for transitioning toward electronic identification to improve the nation's ability to quickly trace exposed and diseased animals in the event of an outbreak. But there's also, from our industry's perspective, a concern that, you know, Cindy is very famous for saying a sheep is not a cow. And we want to avoid a one-size-fits-all plan. And if you don't do something before you have an emergency, what you have in an emergency is a one-size-fits-all plan. So that was one of the other purposes for our working group. This is, it didn't come out very well, but we have a list of all the people. It didn't really show up on this slide very well, of all the people that have been involved. And if you look through it, you'll see that there's quite an array of experts and individuals with tremendous experience from all aspects of animal traceability listed there. And then we also did rely on USDA personnel for subject matter expertise there as well. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy to continue the presentation. And she'll talk a little bit about the working group's findings and what we know about how the industry kind of looks at EID, and then also about the pilot project that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. Neville, can you guys hear me okay? If I don't hear from you, I'll assume.
No, you're perfect.
Yep,
Cindy.
you're good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, real good.
Just as a little bit of background with our industry, in the last year and a half, a secure sheep and wool supply program has been developed and launched. It's been developed by the experts at Iowa State University, and it's available on the ASI website. So it's been perfect timing to get our industry's attention that what could an electronic ID and animal disease traceability program do for our industry if we had incursion of foreign animal disease. Because I'll just be honest, it's not like we have 100% industry buy-in, and we know that there are some really serious wrinkles still present, in the many decades we've been working on electronic ID in multiple species that need to get ironed out. So the most important one that is not yet ironed out, in my opinion, at the moment, and I don't know, Amy, you told me to go ahead and push the arrow, but I might not be smart enough to, let's see here. Keep trying to push buttons and see if something happens. Thank you. Whoops. Okay. Maybe somebody else is pushing them too. All right. So we do have a mandatory ID system for the sheep industry, and it was changed to include all goats as well about 3 years ago. It's a visual tagging system, and that tag has to be in place when animals move off their farm of birth and into market channels. But, let's face it, with a visual system, we wouldn't be able to keep up with real-time traceability and lift quarantines. So would producers voluntarily move to electronic ID? Well, I have played around with the answer of that so many different ways. I think if they saw the merit, like, yes, all of a sudden we had massive quarantines because we had ASF or FMD, then they would be ready. In the meantime, just trying to get ready, that's a possible answer, yes. If it became mandatory, like other countries have had to do for their sheep industries, obviously we would embrace it. We have had no difficulty finding panels of producers to discuss the merits of EID, and they've been really well received, those panels. They've been large flocks, small flocks, etc. And if they aren't convincing, I don't know what is, but not everybody's still convinced. Okay, back in late spring, Erica Senko, our colleague at ASI, did a survey, voluntary survey of about 500 producers, 560, and asked producers how do they currently identify their animals, and are they willing to move to mandatory ID. And so as you can see, 26% isn't too bad, but it's also not too great. was you would think that almost everybody would be using visual ear tags. And so our numbers maybe don't add up perfectly, but we had pretty good embracing of ID. Okay. Why were people using ID and why were they not using, EID? There seems to be this big fear factor out there that it's too expensive. That's kind of the main thing you hear. And I think we need to do a better job at publishing some economic articles. And there are a few out there based on projects, but really not enough. We know all the reasons to use EID, so I won't belabor that. And then in the American Sheep Industry Association, the country is split into regions. And I can't rattle all those regions off as to what's what, but you can see that there are some parts of the country where there are way more no's than maybe than yeses. And we won't guess about where that is right now. Supporting reasons is really coming back to an ADT program. Okay. I'm just going to move along here. I think we got a few things in here that I am going backwards. Okay. So we I'm sorry, I'm not used to progressing this way. So our group met about, about 16 times. And we always met by Zoom. We would usually meet for between 60 and 90 minutes and have some presentations by experts and sometimes just discussions of what our subgroups had worked out. And we came up with some conclusions about developing an EID transition plan. That one, it would be safer for the people working with the animals as well as the animals. Obviously, it's more protective if we had a foreign animal disease. We could truly become more competitive, especially as export markets open up. Definitely not only markets, but producers would become more efficient. We did feel very strongly that the USDA would need to help us make that transition. It wouldn't just happen because it should. There'd have to be some incentives offered. And that's been really well demonstrated and documented over in Australia and in England. Certainly we feel strongly, especially as I launch into our pilot project in just a minute, that the markets would need some assistance with infrastructure development. Definitely get a sense that markets would need to retrofit instead of running, multi-sheep abreast down an alley. They might have to cone them down to single file and place readers at strategic points. If these investments aren't made, then really EID is just not going to work for our industry. So we were funded by the USDA to do an auction market pilot project. And we struggled for a few weeks to months at finding a partner. There was some interest, but some auction markets said we'll only do it if it's a UHF-based program. And we've been advised that it's really difficult to make UHF work well in sheep. They're physiologically different than cattle. So we didn't really want that to be the first project. We wanted to do a low frequency or LF project. And then we have lots of partners that have really made this project get off the ground. The Colorado Department of Agriculture, Allflex, Colorado Wool Growers, a producer, Ernie Etchart, ASI staff, and just tremendous amount of volunteer time. What was our goal was to make EID tags work in the auction market at the speed of commerce, in and out. Okay, so there's all our partners, and I just can't stress enough that this wouldn't be at the stage it is without everyone working together. So what were the challenges? I mentioned one was first finding an auction barn that said, yeah, we'll tackle this with you. Second was we had to make some retrofits in the physical setup. And if you contact a welder and they have the time to call you back, they say, well, we might be able to get there in 2 months. And then 3 and 4 months went by, and basically our our Colorado, well, maybe I shouldn't say, I don't want to get them in trouble, but some of the people, boots on the ground, just came in there and made the retrofits that were needed, even though they might have been veterinarians and veterinary technicians. They just went in and took care of it like it was your own ranch and fixed the problem. Where could the panel reader be placed so that it could read animals into the sale ring and back out? And then our current hurdle that is solvable but hasn't been happening very fast, solving it very fast, is the current sale barn auction software. Will it be able to deal with this EID data? And so where we're at right now today is we're waiting for that sale barn auction software company to provide an upgrade and provide the training. This has been postponed a couple times. They have told us it's because of COVID. I know you're all kind of like me, where I'm a little bit tired of hearing it's because of COVID. And so is this auction barn going to have to look at a different solution? Are we as a pilot project potentially going to have to look at a different solution? We don't know yet, but we think there's other auction software out there that can connect all the pieces and put it all together into one puzzle, rather than have it be a bunch of broken pieces. And lastly, you all know that labor is a real issue. And so will this help the labor issue at the sale barn? Okay, so just a little bit, here's the schematic, and there's a couple key players building the little insert that's going to hold the reader panel. And then you can see the reader panel up there on your screen, especially on the right. You can see there's a few brand new gates. You can definitely tell they're brand new. And then you know how it is with sheep. We got to take away their options so they'll go forward. So that's one reason we've got the barriers placed on the gates. And then this is just our partner flock that is going to provide us some sheep to run through as a mock auction. And we're going to make this thing work in the next couple months well enough to, we hope, to launch it for the everyday, or it's actually once a month at Delta Sale Yard auction. So with that, I am apparently stuck. I don't know. Thank you. Boy, my computer just decided to stop advancing. I don't know if Morgan, if you want to try to advance, since I seem okay. So we thought, as Amy said, the sheep industry better develop a plan with collaborators. We need it to be specific to sheep, and we need to have it ready on a shelf, but we also need to have it tested so we know it really will work. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm sorry to have had so many technological challenges.
So, okay, so thank you, Cindy. So I thought that was really well done. I think that one of the things as you were going through this, I've seen there's some themes here that are consistent with what Paul was saying, actually, in terms of needs there. But for us to achieve compliance, it's going to have to be user-friendly. There's going to have to be business benefits, and also it has to be animal-friendly. And, you know, I don't think we talked about this, but the sheep industry itself was a leader in animal traceability. We've had mandatory identification for our sheep through the Scrapie program for a long time. And so on one hand, that's really good, but on the other hand, it does mean that it's hard to change people away from the visual tags there. And so we do have to show that there are benefits to moving to the electronic ID, which I think is easy, which can be done. But the software question is really one that it needs to be addressed, because just as Paul said about the platforms, the different, getting it more mainstream so that you can use it easily as a producer is going to be an important one there for the business aspect of it. And mine won't let me. Oh, there we go. So one of the things too is the learning from other countries. As Cindy said, a subsidy, in order to do this, there is going to have to be some support from our government there. The question of a mandate, a lot of people get really worried about that a lot. And then, but more importantly, really education is really, really important. And helping people understand how it can help them and where the benefits are. Then, not just the foreign animal disease preparedness, and lamb meat marketing expectation. There was a comment or a question in the chat just a second ago about retail wanting traceability. So how can they be involved? And I think that's a good question for us to consider. How can we get involved there? Again, we just want to say, always express our appreciation to the volunteers who comprised of the working group. The transition, is essential. We know that from the UK experience that traceability is really important in arresting a disease, but also just transitioning to a more efficient identification system will help not only improve the response to an animal disease outbreak, but also maintain the business and operational benefits for producers. Some people will go out of business. That's inevitable, but having a good plan will help us move forward to help those that remain move forward. So one of the things, so I don't know, Cindy, if you had any other comments there. Cindy's the one who put this slide in here. Actually, Cindy did all the slides. Cindy's amazing in this regard. But one of the things that we were thinking as we came to this is how can NIA help us in this? And I think that, and I'll let Cindy step in here a minute, but I think addressing some of these areas where we have problems, the connections, getting all the players together to address some of these needs, the software questions, the what the needs are of markets, because electronic ID, I said this earlier, electronic ID is used in sheep all over the world, and in some places quite extensively. But they also have sheep only markets, and so it's easier to adapt rather than one that takes all different species, and because what your needs are for cattle are different than your needs are for sheep and for goats and all. And so there really is going to be there's really a need to kind of look at this more as a comprehensive project at some point, and so that USDA is able to have an effective ADT system that meets the needs of the industries, the different industries, but also provides them with the, with facilitating their response to an animal disease outbreak. So Cindy, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add there.
No, I don't think so. Maybe the discussion will bring out some points.
Right.
I'd be curious, Dr. Paul, if you if with your work, if you're starting to connect with the auction market software, or if you're continuing to where the software applications are ones that you all have resolved on your own.
We actually are not interfacing with our auction software either, and the main reason why is the software that we're using at this barn is I just got to say antiquated, and they're not terribly interested in trying to interface with us. And so that's why we just decided to go around that and figure out a solution on our own. It's unfortunate, but because it would make their life and our life a lot easier if we could do that. But the reality is there's only a handful of commercial livestock auction software companies out there, and they know it. And so there's not a lot of competition, and they get complacent. And I don't know any of them personally, so I can't say that they're all the same. But that's been my experience, is that it's not enough competition in that field, and I can understand why. I mean, there's not very many livestock markets in the United States to develop an entire software infrastructure for. So that is going to continue to be a challenge if we're looking at trying to build a system that we're going to be able to adapt to livestock markets nationwide. I think the variety of software that's out there that is lacking in the will and the capability to interface with electronic ID systems I think is pretty slim. I would be interested in chatting with you guys at another time to help you with some solutions to get your equipment hooked to the software, though. And I've got some ideas, and I think Fort Supply actually has a fair amount of experience with making those interfaces and connecting different softwares with the hardware. And I think they'd be a good resource to reach out to, even though their specialty is kind of UHF. They really understand the electronics and the hardware software needs to make that happen, whether it's LF or UHF.
So I was remiss in not introducing Ed Klein, who has been really helpful in our efforts there. And I didn't know if he may have some, because he's the one who's been kind of working on the software part of it too, and he's on the ground helping us with this pilot project. And I didn't know if he had anything he wanted to add to this.
Well, what I was going to say, as Cindy pointed out earlier, that the software is what we're waiting on right now to put into the auction market in order to read those tags to a scale ticket, put on the seller's sheet, as well as populating the buyer's sheet for disease traceability. We can read every tag, whether it be by hand or through the panel readers at this time. That's not a problem. Probably, I haven't been able to run a large number of sheep through the reader itself, but it should be able to read between 95 and 100%. One of the tags we're testing has a low read range of 10 inches, and it was picking that low read range tag up almost 2 feet outside of the reader itself, the panel reader. So I'm pretty confident it will collect those ID numbers for us. The other thing that we've done, we've set up the reading system to hopefully in the future accommodate UHF as well for sheep and goats. So hopefully we can build on the LF as well as UHF.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're able to interface with both technologies, and I'm glad that you guys are looking forward and building that capability into there. Right now, UHF, the antennas that they're using are just not miniaturized enough, probably for widespread use in the sheep. But the smallest tag I know of that's a functioning version, I don't know if everybody can see that well, but that's a UHF tag. That tag can be read about 20 feet. Those are coming from Fort Supply. And it is actually a light enough weight tag that you wouldn't probably want to put that in baby lambs, but I think market weight lambs would be fine with that in their ear. But it probably needs to be a little smaller to be widespread adopted in the sheep industry.
That is being worked on, Dr. Chard. I've seen the prototype. It's actually about 1/3 of that size.
Yeah, I've seen some prototypes too. The other challenge that we are going to keep running into is that the mechanism to get a 840 approved UHF tag to the market now is really difficult and cumbersome. And so we need to, if anyone has an opportunity to reach out to USDA and help them make that process easier and more realistic for companies to come forward with new products, we all need that.
Yeah, that was one of the things we identified also in our work.
Dr. Chard, I think that's actually going to become even more cumbersome going forward than less. Right?
I don't want to hear that.
No, in all honesty, my understanding is that there's going to be some rewriting of the rules to get that approved, and it will be perhaps a little bit more challenging going forward. So it's going to become more rigorous even. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
But Neville, do we want to just accept that, or do we want to get together multiple organizations and say, this isn't
Yeah,
gonna.
that's great, Cindy. And I'm talking a little bit out of school and don't really have any information specific to that, but I was in a conversation last week that was mentioned, and that perhaps the rules would be somewhat more rigorous. Yes, I think it's really important, and we need to keep the technology moving as well as we can across all fronts, right?
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
The other frustration I have is, and I don't want to oversimplify anything that happens at auction barns, because I haven't worn the boots of an auction barn operator for, all I do is drop sheep and goats off and collect a check. But I don't understand why we can't go ahead and come up with an inventory supply software system. So those critters coming into the auction barn, their inventory in, and then when they leave, I don't know what the terminology is, but someone on this call they're being purchased, so their inventory out. And so we know that exists for grocery stores and operates at high efficiencies. And yes, the only difference is they don't walk and have a beating heart, the inventory into the grocery store, for example. But we know that software is out there. And so maybe that's a piece that, again, livestock groups should get together and say, we're gonna pay someone to develop this, not the government, because we want it to happen in the next 1 year or 2 months or whatever. But I just don't understand why, like, really, Neville, like you said, we go back a long time, and that obstacle was there then, and yet it wouldn't be for other businesses today.
I think that the current existing auction softwares all do basically what you're describing. So at our barn, when you unload animals, you get a hard copy of it's got a bill of lading number, and then all of the information that would be required from the owner, the seller information and address, and then how many animals you unloaded. So that's your starting inventory. Those go to the office, get entered into the computer system, and then it tracks. So we do basically have a pre-sale inventory. And as you sell animals through the ring, they are pulled off of the pre-sale seller inventory, and they're assigned to a buyer number on the other side of the software. And so you basically do have this fluid inventory that's either a seller's inventory or the buyer pen inventory. So they have to be able to track that, because in Colorado, we're also a brand state. So we have to be able to know what brands are on what animals and how many animals have that brand. So it's actually pretty detailed inventory system. The problem is that none of these systems, I don't think, are very used to doing much of that electronically. And so there's a lot of transposing data by hand, a lot of things being handwritten, and a ton of room for error and opportunities for mistakes. And when we're talking about traceability, I think the room for error is unacceptable with the current system. So I don't know that we need to reinvent the wheel with the software. I just think we need to create enough interest in it that there's enough pressure to at least ask someone to step forward and develop the needs further. The other thing that I think is a reality is most of these auction softwares are very small companies with small development teams, and their biggest key thing is tech support. So if you're in the middle of a live auction and your software goes down, your tech support team has to be ninjas, and they have to fix it immediately. And so I think that's very taxing on these small companies, and it makes it so that it's difficult for them to develop new features. And I think that's part of the challenge, is that there's not enough resources behind it to push forward with what we need from them. So maybe it's how can we help you get to this point is where we need to be for helping them.
Well, I see there's a question. I don't know if he's the first person who has his hand up, but
Ken
Ken
Greiner.
Greiner, yeah.
Ken, fire away.
Thanks, Neville. I was going to speak to Cindy's question. We had a Florida traceability project and this is on the cattle side, but we used UHF back tags, of course, in that. Had one market that completely clerked his sale with UHF back tags, and it worked so effectively, populating paperwork, eliminating loadout errors, blah, blah, blah. Point being that that market owner is so excited because it increased his speed of commerce from 130 animals an hour to right at 200. The sale was getting done 2.5 hours earlier with no error. So, I think my question would go back to Paul. And I'm also a chairman of the board of U.S. Cattle Trace. And over, no matter even the level of intelligence and people we have on this phone call, there is a failure of education. Paul, I would specifically ask you, as you interact with your producers, and I would assume all of them are not huge, but have they been able to embrace the technology as you've been able to bring them up to speed on the benefits? And we're not talking even animal disease traceability there, but just that educational factor of, that's our biggest hurdle in any of these species, is people just don't realize how antiquated our system is.
Yeah.
And how exposed we are.
Well, I think if you can talk to people about the inventory systems that just retailers like Walmart have been using for 25 years, they've been using UHF technology for decades. And then we talk about this is a new technology in the world, and it's really not. It's really just we need it ruggedized and be able to survive in a cow or a sheep's ear, right? That's the biggest challenge. But I'll tell you, the number one biggest thing, if you want people to quit listening to you, is to introduce the idea of traceability to a producer. If I go to them and say, hey, we should use these tags so we can improve traceability, they're shut off. And so that's why my presentation didn't talk much about that, because we don't have much luck selling it from that aspect. And we truly do. I mean, we, as a livestock market vet, we do have to be able to embrace that traceability component. But on the producer side, once people really see how easy it is, and I'll tell you, most of our producers, when we started working for them, had a manual chute, and the owner of those cows would stand there and just ruin his body running that chute for us all day long. And now we've got the hydraulic chutes that we bring. We do all the labor, and they just basically stand there and watch and give input on decisions on the cows. And we do all the data for them, and they see how easy it is when they've got a cow that comes in with no tag, and we scan a UHF or LF tag, and it brings all her history up right there chute side. They really do see the value in that. We've got a few producers that are using the UHF tags for inventory management too. So when they go to ship cows, they'll scan onto the trailer, so they know they're using it. Real early adoption on using the software to do pasture inventories and cattle movement stuff. But really, we're managing most of the data for most of our producers, and they just see that it's just so easy for them to get good, accurate information back. And people like easy. Labor's a tough deal nowadays.
Phil, I think you had a question. Phil Lawler.
Yeah, not necessarily a question. I just wanted to let everybody know that there are sale barn software packages out there that they're already built to accommodate electronic ID, and because we with our systems we've plugged into several of them. You'd be surprised how many software packages there are out there though for sale barns. So some of the, as Paul had mentioned, some of the more antiquated versions may not be built out to accommodate it, but there are options there.
The one problem I see is a sale barn owner, livestock market owner, who's used the same software for the past 25 plus years. They're comfortable with it and hesitate to put that investment and new learning curve into a new software system.
The switching cost always comes into consideration, doesn't it? Yes, yeah, for sure.
Another option that can sit alongside of sale barn software for any operation is just a cloud-based system that tracks, movement from point A to point B to point C, and that can run parallel to auction software. Reads the animals in at receiving, reads them when they go through the ring, reads them as they're at loadout. So that can be part of the discussion as well for monitoring that inventory or workflow, animal flow through a facility. Just throwing that out there.
The concern that our working group came out at this is that in order to adapt for a market to adapt to something like that, they're going to need to have some support, some help there, because I don't see that. Just based on our own experience with the markets, I don't see that they have a financial interest to move to kind of adapt this technology unless that not doing so would put them out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we when we have these discussions, we have to consider what the impact is on the markets, because yes, it can help with our production and stuff, but if what we're trying to do is trace the animals without that technology at the market, it doesn't matter. If there's not the technology to read it at the market, it's not going to matter when it comes down to traceability in the long run.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The cloud-based systems, for example, that I was referring to, those can work in a auction market, similar to the way they can work at a border crossing, at a feed yard. They're not facility specific. It's not going to have all the other functionality that auction software has, but it certainly could accompany. It could be a parallel for that one specific purpose of tracking that inventory and the change of ownership, change custody that occurs there.
We have a lot of focus on what's happening in the livestock all the way through the sale barn. But in our chat, we had a question from Janet Helms asking or stating that retail partners want traceability. How do we support what the retail partners will? Because that pull through and the value creation there is pretty critical to moving this forward. So as you guys see what you do day to day on the production ag side, how do you think we can integrate that with things that would benefit our retail partners downstream?
I'll take a part of that. I do think that the software that we're using, the Fast Herd software, if we're talking about going straight from the operation to a harvest facility and to an end user, that data is already entered in there from a herd basis. And all we really need to do is give the next chain of custody permission to access that data. So that it's pretty seamless from a traceability standpoint there. And I think that it'd be pretty easy to plug that in. I mean, that's already built into some of the cloud-based softwares.
I might add to Dr. Chard that, that's also in the beef industry right now, as well as a manufacturing facility for lamb is incorporating that into their practice for low frequency at the time to benefit those producers who've ID'd their lambs, to return that information to them, and which could go forward in the future to the end consumer.
Maggie Baldwin, you have your hand up. Is there a question that you'd like to ask the group?
Yeah, hi, Maggie Baldwin. I'm a state veterinarian in Colorado. So really happy to have so much Colorado representation on this call. Dr. Chard, thanks so much for your presentation, and of course the support that our animal health division has given the ASI project. I did really want to briefly talk about the sale time modules, and we had a presentation at the Western States Livestock Health Association meeting last year from Sale Time, and they presented on their new veterinary module that they developed for their market software. So that's the only thing I'm more knowledgeable about is the veterinary module, but there's a lot that goes, into their software and their program. The new veterinary module is something that we're really excited about for a lot of reasons. One, it's based on RFID technology. As Dr. Chard mentioned, and as you all know, the less we have to hand enter, the less we have to hand write, the better. But the nice thing on that new module is that it will pull and pre-populate CVIs based on buyer numbers, based on order numbers, and it also can capture, I think, veterinary charges per animal, per group of animals. It seems like a really robust system, and Dr. Chard is one of the folks that I have on my list to reach out to discuss this new module with as well. So in some states, I think in Washington and I believe Idaho, they've had some state projects where they've funded some of this implementation, as Cindy had mentioned. And Amy had mentioned the funding behind some of these is kind of the kicker, right? There's not a lot of money out there for the markets to put into this. So some states are looking at trying to get funding to implement, more advanced market software, things like a sale time with a veterinary component that's really key. The nice thing on that veterinary module as well is that there's a backside for all those CVIs where they drop in, similar to how AgView and GVL, the SAHOs in those states, can access the backside and see those CVIs as they're populated. The same thing happens with the sale time software. So if allowed, the state animal health official in that state would have access to the backside of that software and be able to get the CVI information from there. So I think it might be good, just for this group to hear from Sale Time. It was the first time I had heard a presentation from them at the Western States meeting and got to hear about the state-sponsored projects. And this was actually a project funded by Washington to develop this module, the Washington Department of Agriculture, to help develop this veterinary module to go with livestock market software. So just wanted to throw that out there. I think Colorado's looking into that and seeing how we can help be a partner and support our auction markets and our market veterinarians as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Maggie. I noticed we have David Hikaminovich from Washington on the call. David, you maybe have anything to add to that?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ken, thanks.
Yes, well, Dr. Baldwin, you're absolutely right. We worked with our markets and actually the Sale Time software, the developer, to develop a vet module to be able to take veterinary information that he collects at the chute there and to pair that with the information already collected from the livestock market system, consignee, consigner, and then pair that into a CVI. And that has been very successful. But what we have found out using it is, you are correct, that was said earlier, livestock markets are very hesitant to change. Even when we were willing to purchase a license for them, because they're very confident and comfortable using their existing system. One market actually came to us after they were using a very old DOS version. And when that crashed, they came to us and said, well, I think it's time that if you're willing to support, we're willing to move over. If the developer could help us move our records over. So that was successful that way. So it usually takes a catastrophic event for a market to want to move over to a system. And then what we also found is that you have to give them a carrot. We want the data for traceability. The market wants efficiencies. The vet wants it to meet his accreditation requirements. So you have to be able to provide a carrot for everyone. So, and having that balance that goes across there is really not a challenge, but it's a balance. So everybody has to win-win and see a support. And it's true. You don't want to, call it traceability. Ultimately, the data we receive is all traceable. But how do we get that data? And you have to show that efficiencies to the market. And that's where it really does. It creates efficiencies that they don't have to run back and forth for vet charges. And when at the clerk out at the end of the day, the data is right there on their screen, so they can charge accurately for that. So that's my input, and I'm sure that we can get sale time on this line. I thought we had them on before, but I've attended several different presentations. So, but I know they would be willing to provide a presentation to this forum.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
I was thinking that, as we were talking, there's so many different parts. I mean, we've had a discussion about the interest that from retail. We've talked about the markets. We've talked about the producer benefits on within their production system. We've talked about the needs from animal disease traceability perspective from the state and federal animal health official perspective. It just seems to me that there needs to be something that pulls us all together to kind of work through some of these things. And, and obviously that's what this is what we're trying to do here. But even as we notice just in this group that there are pieces that are missing. And so one of the things that I remember so well about NIA is the ability to have conferences that bring all these players together and help us to be kind of now that we all have these components, how do we move forward as how do we put it all together so that it's an actual functioning program for at all levels,
Yeah, we got a comment from Janet Helms again as well, and she was looking and trying to make the contrast of what they have as far as a farm to fork system in Europe, and whether we need to look at some kind of an animal passport, quote unquote, system to remain competitive. I know that goes a little bit against, Paul, what you're saying is you can blow up a lot of good discussions with the thought of traceability, but ultimately there's a critical mass you need to really be seeing the entire industry engaged and make sure that people are on cooperative and collaborating platforms so you don't have bad data going across into different systems, because that will kill this faster than anything. So how do we try to move towards that terrible traceability word without scaring away the industry and getting that consistency across the platforms?
All right. I just having worked on this a long time, the term passport, is one of those scary moments, just like mandate is a scary moment there. And I think that, again, looking at what the idea of developing software or platforms that can accommodate lots of different needs is one way to do that, something that's a little bit higher up than at the industry level. Let the industries themselves, have the say in what that looks like for them. And that includes the markets, because, the voice that's not here, I know that they're on, but the voice is really what's happening at the markets and what their needs are too. And we can only talk about what we observe and what we've been told. But how do you take all that and move to a higher platform that, the cloud-based technology that you were talking about, the cloud-based data, that is a place where it can all come together, that is usable for everybody, but that you still have, an ability to be individual within your own industry. And that goes back to what I said, is that, we in this country, most of our markets have an array of different species that go through there. But like in the sheep industry, we have two products that we produce, not our wool goes to a different place, so there's a different need in terms of traceability. There's a different need there. And it's not the animal that you're necessarily, you want the wool to be tied back to that animal, that producer to get that value added benefit there, and to meet the concerns that, the international concerns about, was this animal raised in a sustainable and healthy fashion there. But so I think that it's really important that we have to recognize that each segment has their own interest, but how can we bring all those together in a way into a technological platform that can address the other needs, there. I don't know if that made any sense. By the end of it, I didn't think it did, but
Well, it made sense.
I'm gonna say one more time, and I beg your forgiveness, but Paul, I can't help but laugh about your producers, being the aversion to animal disease traceability. But I look at it, and I preach down here. It's like having, all the people on this call. How many of you expect your house to burn down tomorrow? Nobody raises their hand, but everybody pays fire insurance. Because we know it can happen. And going back to Dr. Wolf and Amy's slide, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And if you look at the current map of endemic and blah, 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 foot and mouth disease, it's kind of scary. So I think we do have an obligation, and I think our failure is an educational one. There's too many people that don't understand the exposure of being as antiquated as we are. And I do think we have to get them to understand that, because saying we have traceability now in the cattle industry is kind of like saying, we had mail service with the Pony Express. It's way behind, and we do have to address that. And I think from there, take it to all these management benefits and even, value added benefits. So, but I do think, especially as a vet, we all have an obligation to educate them about our exposure on the animal disease side, because it's going to be, our industry will never be the same.
And one of my favorite sayings is, things that never happen all the time. Right? It will happen. Something will happen. Yes.
The reality in the beef industry, and I don't know if the sheep industry is this way, but I can't imagine a more divided industry than the beef industry. If you just Google beef industry, the top 10 stories that come up are things about lawsuits and antitrust. And I mean, it's NCBA versus RCAF. It's a completely divided industry. And I agree with you that it's critical that we teach these concepts to producers, but who's the one that pushes that forward, and how do we do that in a unified fashion to the RCAF and NCBA supporters alike? How do we generate funding to do that? I mean, these are all questions that are super tough to answer, and I think we need to take a conscious look at it and try to figure that out. But right now, the other side of it is that the trust for our government is probably at an all-time low. And so that's my point with, if you start talking about mandatory or animal disease traceability, people just shut off.
Yeah. I think we have a good, Janet Helms has given us some good comments. I think her comment's good. Do it yourself as a collaborative manner before it's mandated. And I think that's good advice. We're sneaking up on the hour-and-a-half mark, Neville. So I don't know if we should try to rein this in a little bit, or what's the pleasure of the group here?
I think it's been really good discussion. We probably need to be cognizant of time but just really, really good discussion. And obviously, again, there's need to kind of keep this discussion moving forward. And so, yeah.
And that's why we have annual meeting, right, Neville?
That's right. Exactly right. So save the date.
Indeed, so just so you guys know, the March 1st meeting, that one has been sunset, and will be part of the annual meeting on April 21st. So for those that are able to make the trip, you'll be part of a pretty interesting and pretty dynamic conference and council meeting. So Neville, I'll kind of pass it to you to make some final comments. And, again, from my perspective, thank everybody that was on the call, but particularly our presenters today. Amy, Cindy, and Paul, you guys were rock solid, and really appreciated your perspectives.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, again, I started out saying I knew that we would be very applied, and indeed we were, and that's really ultimately where we ended up. And I just think this is really valuable conversation, because we're talking about all these things that are important to both industries, beef and sheep, and ultimately the dairy industry too, and the swine industry. And you know, at the end of the day, it's ultimately about human behavior. It all boils down to people. But really good discussion, and appreciate everyone's participation. So
Yeah, really well done. Thank you all very much. Thanks for joining us, and see you in Kansas City.
Thank you very much.
bye-bye.
Take care.